The Arena Football Hall of Fame has returned, and we want you to become a part of the family. Introducing the Arena Football Hall of Fame Patreon. Whether an All-Star or a Hall of Famer, our reasonably priced tiers each have their own exclusive perks. Early access to the AFL Rewind podcast, honorary selection committee member, and much more. Help us build a Hall of Fame we'll all be proud of. Head to patreon.com/AF Hall of Fame to join. Welcome to AFL Rewind, a look back at all things arena football, sponsored by Phenom Elite. I'm your host, Tim Capper. Well, during this series of historical podcasts, we've been able to speak with many people from across the league, but I find that the stories that we usually get from the owner's point of view give a little bit more insight to a team than, say, would from a coach or a player or an assistant coach. That's why having another owner on for this episode is such a treat. If it wasn't for this gentleman deciding to get into the ownership of an Arena Football League team, we never would have had one of the most exciting rivalries in Arena Football League history, the War on I-4. This episode, we're going to be speaking with Bob Gries. We get to hear about how he not only bought the Pittsburgh Gladiators, almost folded the Gladiators, and then moved the team, and they became what we now know as the very historical Tampa Bay Storm. So I hope you enjoy this. There's a lot of insider information on this that I had never heard, and I think that's the point that we're just trying to get across with these podcasts. Is if you learn one new thing from within the Arena Football League, we've done our job. So here we go, talking with Bob Gries. On this episode of the podcast, we have a gentleman who was the owner of, I think probably three of the best-known names in the Arena Football League. We want to hear about his full history within the league itself. On the line with us now, we have the former owner of the Pittsburgh Gladiators, Tampa Bay Storm, and the Orlando Predators, Mr. Bob Gries. Hey, Bob, thanks for joining us.
Well, my pleasure. It's fun to share some great memories from the past.
For those who don't know your name, I do know that your family was very well involved within the Cleveland Browns itself. But for you in particular, what caught you on to owning an Arena Football League team?
Well, my family first got involved with the Cleveland Rams back in 1936, and that became the Browns, and that lasted for a period of 60 years, and it was certainly great to grow up in that. I first got involved because I was living in New York in 1990. I saw something in USA Today, said arena football teams could be bought for $125,000. I didn't really know much, if anything, about arena football. I thought that was something that I could afford. Little did I know that would become a lot more expensive once I owned the team. But that's how I first got started. I called. They were reformulating the league back then after kind of a barnstorming year in 1990. And I simply said, well, what should I do? Where should I go? And someone said, well, you may want to go to Pittsburgh. And I was living in New York at the time. So I got involved originally with the Gladiators. And it was very short-lived because we played, at that time, only an 8-game season.
Right.
I would go back and forth from New York. I remember, actually, after the second game, and we were 0-2, I was planning to fold my team after the third game, and at halftime I was thinking about my speech of what I was going to say.
Yeah.
And I was going to finish and leave Pittsburgh and go back to New York. And then we came back and won the game. And then in the excitement of winning, I thought, well, I can't really fold it now. and I managed to get through the season. Lost a ton of money, so it became a lot more expensive than my original investment.
Yeah.
and that's how it all started.
Now, coming from a family that had owned an NFL franchise, had you known that there were risks when it came to possibly losing a lot more money than you originally put in, or was it based on the information that Jim Foster may have given you initially about the team and the league?
Well, first of all, there's no correlation between being involved with the Browns and anything to do with arena football.
Okay.
First, our involvement with the Browns, we were minority passive owners.
Okay.
I was a young kid. I was working. You can't even compare the two in the same sentence.
Okay.
I probably was very naive with any business. I should have anticipated. But the pro formas originally that Jim put together, didn't hold true for anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And they were all too rosy, and we all lost a lot more money. And I can't remember if it was in 90 or the next year in 91 when I moved to Tampa, but I think it was 90, but I ended up, in fact, it was 90, we had the Washington franchise fold before they played the first game, so the remaining 5 owners had to pick up a piece of that, and then the Denver team folded halfway through the season, so we had to pick up a piece of that.
Okay.
So by this time the first season ended, there were only 4 of us as owners, and we all owned a piece of 3 different teams.
Right, and unfortunately, that seemed to be the case a lot within the Arena Football League, even through to its all the way through to 2019 when the league filed for bankruptcy. It became official on April 25th, 1990, that you bought the Gladiators. Did you like the name? Did you like the color scheme? Because we'll get into you're renaming the team when you move it to Tampa. But were you okay with your identity that you had at that time, or did it matter?
Oh, I didn't know anything about it, and I wasn't even involved. I was living in New York working, and I had an arrangement with the Pittsburgh Arena,
mm-hmm.
and their marketing people kind of gave me the advice, and I was busy working in New York, and
okay.
So I pretty much just followed whatever they said, and I fly back and forth, and it didn't turn out the way we wanted, either on the field or off. And so the following season, when I moved it to Tampa, then I did get involved in everything. I'd sold my business at the end of that year,
mm-hmm.
and I got involved in everything. And of course, we had a much different experience and great success in Tampa Bay.
For sure. Now it was reported in the paper in 1990 that I'm guessing that you were trying to bring in some local flair to try to get people into the stands. And there was a report that you actually tried to sign Major Harris in 1990 to be your quarterback. It stated that you, at that time, he wasn't sure if he wanted to. He had already signed with the BC Lions of the Canadian Football League. And it was reported that you offered him approximately the same that he was going to get, was about $100K, and also a percentage of the gate receipts. Was that true, Bob?
I don't remember that, to be honest. In fact, I think we made some inquiry. You're asking about something 30 years ago.
I know.
I think we might have made an inquiry to his agent.
Okay.
But I don't even remember anybody seriously responding to it. So I think it was more kind of fluff than anything else.
Okay. And I think it's pretty ironic, too, that you tried to bring him in 1990, and then he ends up playing for the Cleveland Thunderbolts in 1991 and beyond. So I thought that was pretty ironic. Also, in October of 1990, it was reported initially that you were going to be moving the Gladiators to Tampa Bay. You had lost approximately, they said, around $400,000 in 1990, and you're going to be playing in the Suncoast Dome. I do know, according to what it said here, that at the time when it was initially reported, you were in Paris along with the rest of the league at the European exhibitions. Is that correct?
Well, that is correct, within the ballpark of what I lost that first year. Mm-hmm. As I said, like 400 in Pittsburgh, and then, of course, we lost our little share of Washington and Denver. That added insult to injury. I did go over at some point, I couldn't have told you when, to Paris to watch the exhibition that they were putting on there. So I remember that. I don't remember exactly when, but that sounds right.
Okay. Yeah, because I think it was mentioned in the newspaper that they wanted a quote from you. So you actually had to, when it was initially reported, they came to you for a quote, and they had mentioned that's where you had been with the, with the rest of the league and promoting the league overseas. It became official on November 20th, 1990, that you were going to be moving the team to the Suncoast Dome. What were your initial thoughts, Bob, when it came to seeing how cavernous the Suncoast Dome was in Tampa? And did you think that that arena football, considering how small the field is, was going to work there?
Well, I looked at 3 cities. I looked at Charlotte, Atlanta, and Tampa. Mm-hmm. Looked at all of them objectively. Didn't know much about any of them. I always saw the Suncoast Dome, now today Tropicana Field.
Yeah.
I wasn't really worried about the size thing because we had, put the field in and figured out how to kind of section off part of the stadium. But what was fantastic was I was the only tenant in there, so it was great. There wasn't a baseball team, there wasn't a hockey team. So we had the whole building to ourselves. We were able to set up our field. We practiced in there every single day, which, helped versus other people that couldn't always practice in their building. And so it was a great hockey came, I think, in '92. So we had to kind of juggle a few things there. Baseball never came until after we left, or after I sold the team in '94. Mm-hmm. But I loved it, and it was a fantastic experience. And St. Petersburg welcomed us with open arms.
Was that the final nail that allowed you to say, I'm going to Tampa and not to those other 2 cities?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was taking a flyer wherever I went. Mm-hmm. But I was very scared of baseball. I have to say, part of the negative experience in Pittsburgh was I didn't appreciate what it was like to compete against a baseball team. And, when you're a pro team and you have all your season ticket sales booked, you don't care if it rains or what the competition is. Your money's in the bank.
Right.
When you were arena football and you had no money in the bank and you only had 4 or 5 or 6 potential dates, everything was critical. And I remember getting clobbered when we had some games when the Pirates played and thinking, wherever I go, I don't want to deal with baseball. So Atlanta really got ruled out because of that. Charlotte and Tampa were fine, but Tampa Bay really opened us with open arms and were always great to us, for all 4 of those years I was involved.
So it was baseball and not drawing that well in Pittsburgh, which is really the catalyst to you deciding to move the team.
Yeah, I wanted to stay away from baseball, I have to say, and Tampa Bay, it worked out well. And I caught Tampa Bay at the right time when the Bucks were not very good or thought about. So, we got a lot of magic in the bottle, and I was a really good marketer. So, a lot of good and fun things happened, and of course we won championships in 2 of those 4 years.
Yep. You had run a name the team contest. It was initially launched on February 8th of '91. They are officially renamed the Storm on March 12th, 1991. It was mentioned there that that if you could have named the team the Brawlers, you would have done so, because there were 60-some-odd names or so, I think, that were suggested within the Name the Team contest. And you originally wanted to go with black and red. I mean, at least that's what it stated. Were you okay with the name that you came up with in the end, based off of location and colors and stuff like that? Because as you said at the beginning, you became very involved in what the team was going to be going forward.
I don't ever remember considering it the Brawlers ever, to be honest. Now, again, this is 30 years ago,
sure.
So I won't dispute. If I said something, it would have been truthful, but I don't ever remember that. And the Storm, seemed like it was a perfect name. I think I think Bill Boggs, who worked at the Suncoast Dome, always kidded me that he was the one that came up and recommended the name, and that may well be. But I don't remember the history on that, but the Storm turned out to be a terrific name.
Yeah. Do you remember, just off the top of your head, do you remember any of the other team names that had been suggested? No? Okay.
No, I really don't.
Because I will admit, for as long as I've known the league, it's very strange to call the team in Tampa anything but the Tampa Bay Storm. So what was your before we get actually on the field? What was your initial thought of the league's I guess partnership with Zubaz in 1991? I mean, you have technically a brand new team, and then you have to wear these unique jerseys and uniforms. I mean, yes, they were being given to you because it was a league sponsor, I guess. But had you wished that you'd been able to go with a traditional type of uniforms, or were you okay with the Zubaz in 91?
No, I loved the idea from the start, and I was the only owner of. I think we had 8 teams that year. I guess we added, forget who we added, but we got to 8 that year in 91. I was the only one that would wear the full Zubaz uniform. There were like 2 variations, and maybe it had to do with the pants.
Okay.
That one was the full Zubaz, like those sweatpants were,
yes.
And other people wanted to wear it just as a stripe. I said to the owners when they'd say, "Oh, this doesn't look like the NFL," I said, "This is silly. We aren't the NFL. We're never going to be the NFL. We need our own identity." So I loved it from the start, and I often tell people one of the greatest moments we ever had was in 1993. We were playing Miami, and at halftime, our coach, Larry Kaharick, decided he was going to switch. I don't even know how he found, because we were no longer wearing them. But we had the entire team switch into the Zubaz uniforms, and when they came out at halftime wearing them, the fans went into a standing ovation like I had never seen before in all the years.
Wow!
And I remember that, and so I loved them. I still have a few of them remaining. And they were fantastic.
Yeah, even so, I don't know if you know that for the 25th anniversary of the Tampa Bay Storm, and it just happened to fall on the 3,000th game in league history, they recreated those Zubaz uniforms and happened to wear them in their opening game versus the Orlando Predators. So it was a sight to see for sure.
I didn't know that, but that's great to know.
Yeah. What were your thoughts on your head coaching that first year? Originally, you had the head coach and GM for Pittsburgh, but there was talk that he most likely was going to stay in Pittsburgh when the team left. What made you decide on Fran Cahercy as your head coach?
Well, when I came to Tampa and I asked people for kind of some advice, and everybody also thought that to some degree coaches with local identity helped. I don't think it really did, but Fran was recommended because he had coached about 20 years before at the University of Tampa, and he'd been very, very successful at the University of Tampa. But to be very honest, and Fran was a really good guy, but Larry Kaharick did the majority of the work.
Okay.
And Fran was a little bit more of a kind of a figurehead. And it was surprising, and it didn't go over really well, but the morning after we won the championship in Detroit, I met with Fran and told him I was replacing him, and I was making Larry the head coach because, I just realized, Larry had done the majority of the work, the majority of the recruiting. Larry was really an active coach. And if I was going to go forward and continue to be successful, I needed Larry as our head coach.
Okay.
So Fran was a really good guy, but then I replaced him with Larry, and Larry remained the coach for my remaining 3 years.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, I think Larry was was your OC that year. Is that correct?
Yes, in 91.
Yeah,
correct.
91. Yeah. And now I just ask, as an aside, when it comes to being a sports fan and stuff like that, Bob, what's it like when you know that you win a head coach of the year, which Fran did, and then he doesn't come back for your favorite team that next year? Is it awkward being that, or is it at the time it was just business? He says, you said Larry seemed to be the brains and so what behind the team. There was nothing against it. He just happened to win the head coach of the year that year.
Well, it's always tough, and but the reality simply was that Larry was into this 24/7 and just doing unbelievable work, and he'd been in Canada, so he knew players from everywhere. And Fran saw this kind of more as maybe a fun thing, and he wasn't really, he didn't really want to roll up his sleeves and get into the nitty gritty. And I knew otherwise I would lose Larry. So I had to make that decision. It wasn't easy being a 30-year-old kid. It was tough. Fran was older than me and well respected, but I made a decision, and obviously it was a good decision because we had great success with Larry continuing.
Yeah, for sure. And now, were you the type of owner who wanted to deal with the type of players that you were going to be getting? Because obviously, you picked up a huge one when it came to Jay Gruden being your quarterback that year, and everybody in football now knows the name Jay Gruden and what he's done. Are you the type of hands-on owner, or did you let your coaching staff and GM just deal with that?
Well, I was very involved in doing all of the marketing. That was the primary thing, to sell tickets and do advertising and sell sponsorships. I never got involved in the football side of it. Like, I don't think I ever sat there and watched a practice.
Okay.
I might have gone in for 10 or 15 minutes, but I didn't get involved in that side of it. I hired guys and let them do their job. I will say one great thing about Fran Kersey. I think it was the finest moment. And this is a story very few people know. And I'm going to compliment Fran and Jay Gruden. Right after we won the playoff game, and we were going to begin preparing for Detroit in the championship in '91, I was called by Fran, and he said, "You've got to come down. We've got a real problem here." And one of our players had played the previous year for Detroit, and Mike Ilitch, who was a billionaire and all that, and a fabulous guy and very good to me. But Mike had always paid the players a lot more than whatever the rules were. I never did that. I went by what the rules were and, scared of doing otherwise. And so I was told that the player had told all of our players, this is what Detroit's getting for playing in the championship, and we need to get the same. And so I came down there, and basically the players decided they were going to go on strike, and they weren't going to play in the championship game. And I thought, holy smoke, this is insane. And Fran went and got all the plane tickets. We walked in there, and he said to all the players, you got a decision to make. We've been really good to you. Your owner's good to you. I'm sure he'll take good care of you, but you make a decision whether you're going to play or not. We're going out to the practice field, and if you're not there in 15 minutes, here are your plane tickets. We'll arrange for you to get home, and we'll find 20 other guys that want to play this Saturday night for a championship. We go out to the field. We wait 15 minutes, no players. 20 minutes, no players. 30 minutes, no players. I am really starting to freak out. And then all of a sudden I see Jay Gruden's head coming through the tunnel, all the players following Jay. A word was never said. We had our practice. We went on like regular business. We won the championship in Detroit that Saturday night. And I ended up taking all the players down to the Bahamas after that, which may or may not have been within the rules, but it all worked out. But I thank Fran for his leadership in that moment, and Jay's as well.
Did you ever at any point speak with Jay to ask him what was said in the locker room to convince the players to come out?
Oh, I've kidded Jay a few times over the years about that. And, we never got into any real details, but, he always said I had it under control and you didn't need to worry. We all wanted to go play for a championship and get a ring but I respect Jay a lot and Fran a lot for, their leadership there.
Wow. That even adds more to the story of the legend that is Jay Gruden in the AFL. That's absolutely amazing. I'm thank you for sharing that. That's great. As you said, you're coming from where you did your last year in Pittsburgh. I think you went 3-5, not doing that well when it came to the fans in the stands, and then 91, your first year as the new owner of the new Tampa Bay Storm, you go and you knock off one of the most legendary teams in AFL history at the time, the Detroit Drive, and you did it at their place. What was your thought going into the Arena Bowl, before the game, and then afterwards? I mean, how exciting or how nervous were you?
Well, first of all, let me start by saying that credit is due to Larry Kaharick. Mm-hmm. Larry put together a exceptional team. Larry found players from all over the place that had never played arena football before. We had a great coaching staff. I remember we had John Fonce was coaching that year. We brought in some great players because Detroit really, had dominated the league. They had experienced the guys. But I was confident because we played them. I mean, most people would forget this, except me. We played them in Detroit in the middle of the season, and we beat them 38-29 in Detroit. And I think we kind of shocked them because, people didn't beat them like that then. But we had some great players, Jay and Stevie Thomas that came in, and Darren Willis and Bo Wright, and the list goes on. And actually, a lot of those players, or some of those players, got injured after that first season in the off season. Because I know I went into 92 without four of our top guys, or I think we would have won, frankly, championships every year. But we were confident. It was a great game. If you go back and watch that game, it went back and forth. I don't think any team was ever ahead by more than a touchdown. And we got the ball back with 48 seconds, and Jay threw a great pass to Stevie Thomas for the touchdown. They got the ball back. We still had to stop them after that. They had Schleister as their quarterback.
Yep.
But we just had a great team and a great defense, and we pulled it out, and it was really sweet.
Do you have any? How was your dealings with Coach Markham? Everybody knows that God rest his soul, that he was a very unique gentleman. A lot of stories about Coach Markham, and anybody can see him on the old tapes these days, the game tapes, that he is one heck of a guy to just as a coach. Do you have any? Did you deal with Coach Markham in any way?
Well, I didn't. First of all, when we walked out of the arena after that game, I ended up seeing Markham, and I didn't know Markham at all, other than that he was the coach. I had never probably even spoken a word to him.
Okay.
And I went up to him thinking I was like being wise, and I said, Tim, I just want you to know this is really a good thing for the league that somebody finally beat Detroit. And it'd be like walking up to Belichick and saying that. And he kidded me about that for years. He said, that was as close as I ever came to freaking strangling somebody. I didn't want to hear any of that bullshit about it was good for the league. So we became, good friends really after. I mean, we had a real rivalry with them certainly through 93. They kind of disbanded in 94. But for those 3 years, it was us in Orlando and Detroit. And I remember when we went back there in 93 for that championship, Larry was convinced Larry was convinced that Markham was in there bugging our practice and watching from somewhere in the arena. And so Larry, he was certain that Markham had guys that had binoculars that were trying to spy and watch our practice. So both of them have, sadly passed away, both Larry and Tim. So we'll never know about that. But it was a heated rivalry for those 3 years.
I'm looking right now at a picture of the ring that you designed for your championship team. Do you still wear that ring today?
Oh yeah, I still have that, and I have our '93 ring, and I actually wear it once in a while because the rings today are all so large, it's almost too gaudy to wear them. But that ring is a really great ring, and it still is reasonable enough. You weren't too embarrassed wearing it.
So glad to get out of that dang time travel machine.
Where'd you go?
I went back to the 80s to grab some of that good sports merch from my favorite defunct franchises. I spent my life savings on that machine.
You bought a time travel machine to buy sports merchandise.
Yeah, gladly.
You know you could have gone to 503 Sports, right? The website?
Yeah, no, I didn't think of that at all.
Yeah, they sell all sorts of throwback sports merch from leagues like the World Football League, XFL, UFL, and the Arena Football League, several others.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah, they sell hats, shirts, even custom jerseys from all sorts of vintage sports teams.
Oh, man, I spent a lot of money on that time travel machine.
Well, look, listeners of AFL Rewind get 10% off their first order by using the promo code ArenaFan at checkout. That might help you out.
Yeah, it does.
Go on over to 503-sports.com and get your merch today.
Do you know anyone who wants to buy a overpriced time travel machine?
No, sorry, I don't.
I do know, too, as you said, a couple of championships, also another claim to fame, and it's a record that still stood even up to 2019, was your single-game attendance record back in 1993, where you drew a massive 28,745 people to the Suncoast Dome. I've seen and heard picture and seen audio of that game itself. Was it? I couldn't find anything, but was it a certain promotion that you were running that day, or what was it in particular to draw so many people in to watch arena football?
Oh no, there was a big story behind that. When we played the opening game of that season, and we had lost in '92 to Orlando in the playoffs in Orlando, and that rivalry was even bigger than with Detroit. When we went down there in '93 to start the season, their Orlando fans had, been throwing things at our players because the fans were right there on top of the bench.
Right. I
used to sit in the front row, and they knew who I was, and they used to say things to me, and they'd say things to my girlfriend at the time. It's ironic I became an owner in Orlando because it was pretty bad back then. And so what happened was, one of our players, Tank Landry, kind of a fight broke out, and he went up into the stands on crutches in the first row, and I saw this was going to be a bad scene because I happened to see a young kid down the row, and I went to grab Tank from behind and pin his arms because he couldn't do much on crutches.
Right.
And when I did that, an usher came down and literally cold-cocked me right in the face.
Wow.
As though I was the guy starting it. And I went a little nuts, and he started to throw me out of the arena, and I'm going now ballistic, going, I'm the owner, I'm trying to break this up. They caught this all on TV as well. So I came back literally really pissed off, and we ended up losing the game as well. So I went on TV and kind of a la the WWE, started doing all of our promotions about this is what Orlando did. They spit on our players. They called our women names. All of this was true.
Yeah.
And that just was probably one of the best promotions we ever did. It also inflamed Orlando. They sent over 20 buses, apparently 1,000 people to the game.
Wow.
And then we ended up losing, I think, 46-45.
Yes.
in the game, which was just heartbreaking. I walked out that night thinking really the world was going to end. And then we came back in the playoffs to beat them 55-52 in Orlando in one of the best arena football games ever. So there was, some poetic justice to it.
Oh, for sure. I'm just looking at it. I mean, as you said, Tampa Bay, if you look at all the sports rivalries today, Bob, you have to admit, and I will put Tampa Bay and Orlando right there on top. With all the ones, with Alabama, Auburn, Michigan, Notre Dame, et cetera, et cetera. It's right up there because it was always, no matter how good or how bad the teams were, they always came to play. They always came to play. So,
yep.
As you said, you won the championship after knocked off Orlando in the semis, and you knocked them off at their place, by the way. And then you went on to play Detroit again at Detroit for the championship in Arena Bowl 7, which you did win. You shellacked them. You beat them by 20 to win your second championship. As an owner, do all championships feel the same, or was this one sweeter than the first one?
No, I can't say it was sweeter. I mean, the first one, it was certainly my first, and we were probably the underdogs. It was fantastic. That second one, I can't say that we expected to thump them like we did because, I mean, you couldn't help but just have enormous respect for them. And they were the defending champions. Mm-hmm. They had beaten up Orlando, who had beaten us the year before, pretty good when they won their championship, also in Orlando. So, you knew they were really, really good. But we had a great team that year. I mean, I look back on that team, and there were some players like Andre Bowden, that went on to play a little bit in the NFL, Keith Browner, we just had a great football team. I'll never forget, too, in the locker room before the game, we had brought up a young girl named Amanda Bernstein. She was 9 at the time. She was a great anthem singer. And she had sung for us during the season, and our coach, being superstitious, wanted to take her up there. And so I said, great. So she came with her director, who would later become my wife.
Right.
And in the locker room before the game, Larry got up and he gave this speech, and he said something to the effect of, she's there singing. She's about 3 feet high and 9 years old with little curly blonde hair and adorable. And he pointed all those players and said, you are this little girl's hero, and don't you let her down today. And went on for about a minute, and it was really one of the greatest sincere speeches I ever heard. And we just went out there and we just kicked their asses. So it was in its own way just a great game, is equally as good as the first.
And you can say you were actually, when it came to the Arena Bowl, you were 2-0 versus Coach Markham. So
well, not only 2-0, but we had beaten him in the 91 season.
Yep.
So I always kidded Markham after that through the entire 4 years, we were 3-0, and he never beat us ever. And that, believe me, that would send him through the roof.
94, going to be a little bit of a change for you. Obviously, the team itself didn't do as well as it had for the past 3 years. You're at 7-5. You get knocked off by the Massachusetts Marauders, who happen to be the former Detroit Drive. And then this year it comes about that there are talks that you are thinking of selling the team. What made you decide to put the Tampa Bay Storm up for sale? Well,
unfortunately that year, going from 93 to 94, we lost, very similar to 91, but we lost, I remember 4 of our best players. Andre Bowden went to the NFL. Mm-hmm. Keith Browner didn't play again. I'd have to think it through, but we lost 4 critical players to the team. And I don't know, we just started out bad. We never really recovered. It was disappointing because it was the first season we really, really weren't in contention ever. But I decided to sell the team because while I had loved this, each year I was losing more and more money.
Right.
I mean, I think the first year I lost $100,000. The second year I lost $200,000. And first it was 30 years ago, and I was a young kid, and I didn't have that kind of money to lose. And that last season, I remember losing a lot of money, and I just, I just didn't have the ability or the desire to keep doing that. I wasn't, a billionaire like Mike Ilitch.
Right.
So the time had come. And it prevented me from ever really working because all my time was spent really working with the team.
Right.
So it had been a great run, but it was time to sell the team.
Now, out of curiosity, some people may ask, well, you were drawing, I think it was close to 20,000 at Suncoast Dome. What was the cause for losing all that money? Was it because I think the salaries increased. I think at one point the league decided to do away with a cap and add in a new luxury tax, so to speak. But what in particular was that you remember was the reason for losing so much money increasingly all those years?
Well, first of all, it was always misleading the crowds. Let's start there because even though and we didn't have 20,000 every game.
Right.
We were not like Detroit that would give away all the tickets for free.
Right.
But we probably did have a couple thousand tickets a game that were promotional tickets, or I used to give away tickets with the schools. I used to give away tickets at the radio stations, all of that stuff. And then we used to have in the upper deck really cheap seats at like $5. And the whole key in what I learned, and probably the big mistake I made, I'm not sure that would have made a big difference, was it's all about, selling season tickets.
Right.
And so I probably should never have opened the upper deck. I should have left it at like 14,000 people, created much more demand, which would have created selling more season tickets, which would have meant I would have spent less money on advertising, because to compare it to Orlando, which only had an arena back then of like 13,800 people, they would generate about $100,000 more revenue per game with less people than I would generate with whatever my numbers were.
Okay. And
that was all a supply and demand situation. And I can't say for certain that would have happened, but I never had more than 3,800 season tickets, and Orlando had, close to 10,000 season tickets. And so, and I always treated people well. I always paid our coaches well. My hero then and even to this day was Eddie DeBartolo. I just admired what he always did, taking care of his players. And, I tried within my own limitations to spare no expense to treating him well and taking good care of him and getting him good apartments and feeding him well and taking him out after the games and having fun. So, we had zero TV money, so the only money we ever could count on was our gate receipts and whatever sponsorship money you could bring in. And so that's... but by the way, no one else ever made any money either. The real question just was, how little can you lose? And then, of course, years later when all the NFL teams came in, or some of them came in, it got ratcheted up from losing hundreds of thousands to literally millions.
Yes. So, yeah. Did you find that also one of the reasons that may have been that you were losing money was the rent itself for the Suncoast Dome? Because say, for instance, if you had played didn't exist then, but say if you had played at Amalie Arena at that time, do you think you would have lost less?
No, that had nothing to do with it, because I had a great deal with the arena. I paid them more money, but I received the majority of all the concessions as well.
Oh, wow, okay.
Because I realized, if I'm going to put in all these people, I should make something from the beer sales and everything else. So, no, I had a great deal, and the people at the arena were fantastic to work with. And way back then, I worked with people in the city like Rick Dodge, and no, they were Well, as I think about this, I can tell you one of the big problems we had, now I'm remembering all this, was with workers' compensation. Because we started in my first year and our workers' comp was $30,000. In our last year, they wanted to charge us $300,000.
Whoa.
Which we could never have afforded, and thankfully we found out we could self-insure in the state of Florida, but other clubs in states couldn't do that in places like California and others. And workers' comp was probably business-wise the single biggest problem for 20 years that the league faced. And what would happen is a lot of players, because this was a job where they were making $500 a week for 8 or 10 weeks, they go home and they'd collect workers' comp benefits, and when the insurance companies, after paying that out for a year or two, then they raised our premiums, as I said, by tenfold.
Yeah, and I think that's what you're saying makes sense, because with the story where the Albany Firebirds, their offices and where they practiced was in the state of Vermont, about 45 minutes away. So they technically weren't in Albany either, so that they could save money on workman's comp. So I completely understand what you're saying. We know the name Woody Kern. I mean, he's very well known in the Arena Football League. Was the owner originally of the Fort Worth Cavalry. How did you two get together and start talking about him purchasing the Storm?
Well, Woody was a really good guy, and Woody was a Texan's Texan. Just a good old boy. He's like to be remembered, I think. I think I just went up to him at halftime of a game in '93, and for some reason, I don't remember why, he had a connection, I think, to Tampa. I can't remember why I thought that. Maybe it was nursing homes he owned here. I could be wrong, but he seemed really into it, and I said, Woody, I'm going to likely, sell the team at the end of the year, and if you'd be interested, then let me know. I don't think now I do remember it wasn't going well for him in Fort Worth, and so I said, this might make some sense if you want to continue. We've got the premier franchise and a good situation, lots of support, and that's how it all started.
Okay. It was reported in the newspaper before and after the sale itself that you got anywhere between $500,000 to $850,000 for the team. Is that anywhere near the ballpark, or was it more than that?
Yeah, no, I want to say I got either 500 or 550. I can't remember now, but it was, and Woody was a tough negotiator. But yeah, I got either 5 or 550. Okay.
So you sold the team as of September 1st in '94. So now you're the former owner of the Tampa Bay Storm. After you sold the team to Woody, you're not. Were you involved with the league in any way? Because obviously you're not an executive. You're not on any of the boards. What did you do before that, leading up to your time before you joined the ownership group of the Preds in 2003?
Well, one of the things that kind of led to also selling was, it was right about that time, I remember the league starting to talk about unionizing, and I thought this is insane. I mean, everybody sitting around this table is losing money, and if you unionize, we're all going to lose a lot more. And I remember thinking in the end of '94, this is a good time to exit. So I did. I sat out, for almost 10 years. I continued to enjoy the game, watch the game. And at the time, I was doing a lot of lending money to businesses, and at some point, I kind of realized the Predators, which I obviously knew well from competing against them. Yeah, they were in some trouble. I made a loan to them of like $500,000 back then, and I can't remember all the details now. That led at some point to getting involved and putting some money in on a equity basis as well.
Okay.
And And I think back then, I for about a year, I really worked with Brett Bushy, and I said, Brett, they owed a lot of money, and I said, let me handle and work out all the problems, and you focus on the sales and marketing. And so we did that for the better part of the year and kind of got the team in better shape. And Jay was back by then also. And so, it was a good experience, and I wasn't, Brett ran it day to day. I was involved passively and then actually much less over the years. And it was just really then just an investment.
How was Brett as an owner? Because, fans from across the league, Predator fans will remember Brett in a certain way, and obviously the fans in Los Angeles will remember Brett in a certain way because when he was part of the ownership group for the Kiss. How was Brett as an owner?
Well, I liked Brett. We had some differences over the years. I think Brett was, the only thing I'd say critical was he was too much of a salesman sometime. And, there were a couple business issues over the years that we tangled over. But, he was a really good operator, probably the best in the league. He really cared. I liked Brett. And I wasn't involved in anything when they went to L.A. I think they caught up to him a little bit, not realizing that Orlando, was entirely different than L.A. But,
right.
But I like Brett, and we got along well, in spite of wrestling over a few things over the years.
Now, you talk about wrestling over here, and I happened to pop up on something. I at least had to ask you about this. Supposedly in 2004, you were fined $10,000 by the league for a blow-up doll night at the arena. Is that true?
It is, and I don't remember much about it. It kind of went out of control, and it was just, I was involved working with Brett and doing a lot of promotions back then. And I don't know kind of how it even began. There was nothing whatsoever that was intended to be sexually orientated about it. I think what happened was there was one person that used to pass around an inflatable in the upper deck.
Okay.
And as people would use beach balls and do
right.
things like that.
Yeah.
And we said something like, okay, let's have an inflatable night. And we thought, all right, this will be good. We'll have, 100 beach balls, and we'll have all kinds of other things, and it'll be kind of a fun, zany promotion. And that was kind of the intention. Never did it cross our minds, never, that people would bring, I don't even know that I really knew they existed like this. They'd bring female or sexually orientated blow-ups. As I saw the first one, I literally, just shivers went through my body thinking, oh my God, this is not what we intended. Totally embarrassed, apologized afterwards, never intended anything like that, but that's the story as best I can remember it.
Now, it was obviously at the time too, you were dealing with Commissioner Baker, and do you think the league went light on you guys when it came to the fine that you remember? Or because I know Commissioner Baker, as I said, he's a hulking gentleman himself, and he's just as much as a promoter as anybody else. But do you remember the type of admonishment besides the fine that the league gave to you guys?
Not much. David Baker was a really good guy, and I liked David, and he did call me out of the meeting and admonish me, and all I could say was, I was wrong, sorry, didn't intend this, my bad, won't happen again. Took my medicine, appropriately, and that was that. But it wasn't my finest moment in marketing history, I'll say that.
How's that you got more flack for that thing that episode when there was a report too that you had these very unique and original billboards going up around the city. I think one was it was a woman in a football jersey. I can't remember what the tagline is that you used, but how did you get more? How come? I guess because you would think that the advertisements are more prevalent and they're more out in the community. Why do you think that you got more flack for the doll incident than the advertising?
Well, I don't think we did. I mean, it may be reported that way, but it wasn't a big thing. I'm sure there was an article in the paper the day after, and
right.
and it obviously came to the attention of the league. But no, I don't remember it as being anything other than that.
Right.
As for other marketing, from the very beginning, we did all kinds of, we had people getting married at halftime, and we had giveaways and diamond nights, and just did a lot of fun stuff that the crowd got into. I remember we had a Hawaiian night, and everybody came dressed in that. So, so we did lots of promotions, and they were good and they were fun, and I think the people who are in Tampa,
right,
in particular, I'll occasionally run into people sometimes that'll, 30 years later, talk about that. And I know one of our big fans back then was George Steinbrenner, and may he rest in peace. He was my hero, and when I first came down here, and my dad had been friends with George, and I went to see him, and he was our first season ticket holder, and he was so gracious to me and told me, Tampa Bay was his town, and anywhere I needed to go, if I didn't get a warm welcome, just to call him, and he loved all the promotions. I used to talk to him way back then about that, and he was a big fan of them.
That's cool. What how much longer were you with the Preds, and what finally, I guess, I don't want to say soured you on the ownership group, or what finally said to you, what made you say, okay, enough is enough?
Well, nothing soured me. I got involved, and then with each year, my involvement probably got a little bit less because, the team was doing what it needed to do, and Brett was doing a good job running the team.
Right.
We never made any money. That was the problem. You could do everything right, and yet the question just was, how much are you going to lose? Over those years, really, Ron House in particular got more active and really kind of stepped in and became the majority owner.
Okay.
And then what happened was when the league started to because of the 2008, kind of financial crisis,
yes,
teams started dropping out, and it got to a point where there was like only 4 or 5 teams left, and somehow, because Brett had gone off to L.A., I had to speak for Orlando, and I finally had to say, look, we can't run a league with 5 teams. And I remember Markham got really ticked off at me and called me afterwards and jumped all over me, and I said, look, Tim, the reality is what it is. It's not my fault. You didn't call up and jump on John Bon Jovi's case. We can't run a league with 5 teams and 4 teams, and then of course the league, sat out and then ultimately went bankrupt, and then we started it all up again, with the Predators in like 2010 again.
Mm-hmm. So you followed through you were with the Predators in a minority situation the entire time, all the way through?
You mean from like 2003 to 2008?
Yeah.
Yes, I was involved, different percentages, but I think I owned as much in the very beginning as like 25%, and then I think that went down when Ron got involved and bought up most people's stakes. I don't remember what it was in the very end, but yeah, I was involved during that entire time.
Okay. And your last year to owning a part of an arena football team was in '08, or did you take part in Jerry Kurz's version in 2010 and beyond?
I wasn't involved in the team. I was not involved in the team. I did participate, with 10 or 15 others in buying the league out of bankruptcy.
Okay.
But I had a very small piece of that, and that was really just more thinking it was going to, be a good business investment.
Right. Okay. So you're part of the actual. I guess you were part because of you. You were part of the relaunch itself in 2010. Okay.
I was part of it, and we just literally finally got our money back and really nothing more. So it was pretty much a non-event, and then we just finally got a few $1,000s just a few months ago to bring complete closure to it. So I guess for the first time now, after 30 years, with the exception of my little break, I'm completely out, as everybody else is now too.
Right. Rob, what are you gonna remember the most about the Arena Football League if it never comes back? What you yourself as a former owner, what are you going to remember the most about the AFL?
Well, how great the game was. I always said to people, if you've never seen a football game, you probably watch an outdoor game and watch an indoor game, you'd probably fall more in love with the indoor game if you didn't know about the tradition of Notre Dame or, the National Football League, because the game itself just was really that good and that entertaining. It was always disappointing to me that we didn't get this to a higher level, particularly when we had our 4 years of being on NBC. I always disagreed with a lot of people in the league. We should have gone to the NFL and NBA and NHL and all those guys, and we should have just really given them franchises along with the commitment to market the teams and stay in it for a period of years and use their infrastructure and their season ticket bases and their expertise. And we should have grown the league to something much bigger and better, and we should have developed it over in Europe and other places, because it's just that great, really, of a game. Beyond that, like anything, the relationships, I don't really see or stay in contact with the players, but we had a great group of guys, great group of coaches. I mean, Larry Caher, he was a great coach, and I was sad when he passed away from cancer. I was sad to hear about Coach Markham. Sad about Woody as well. There's just a lot of good people and a lot of great memories.
I want to thank you, obviously, for being able to tell the stories that you have. I am impressed when somebody who's been with the league for such a long time is to be able to be as open and transparent and to tell the stories that you did, because I'm sure myself and other fans and especially Tampa Bay fans may have heard some stories today that they had never heard before. I appreciate your time. You will always be a part of the Arena Football family, being that you, with the amount of time that you spent with the league, and I really appreciated giving me your time today.
Well, thanks so much, and I wish everybody the best. It's been a great experience for the past 30 years. Thanks very much, and everybody be well.
We want to thank Bob Gries for coming on the podcast this episode. It gives us a pretty good insight on the early days of being an owner within the Arena Football League. If you happen to miss any of the previous episodes, there are a couple places where you can catch them and get caught up. You can listen to them over on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and then our audio version over on YouTube. If you have any questions or suggestions on who you'd like to hear in future episodes, you can reach us at aflrewind@arenafan.com. So thanks for joining us for this episode. We'll be back for the next episode very shortly with another great inside look at the people, players, and executives that you knew from the Arena Football League. So for everybody here at AFL Rewind, I'm Tim Capper. Watch the rebound. off the net.